I'm Anakin, and welcome to the Horror Zone. I had been driving for Uber for almost a year now, navigating the streets of the city at all hours. The night shift was usually quiet, just the occasional bar goer or insomniac needing a ride. That night though, things were different. It was around 2 a.m. when the request came in. The pickup location was an old mansion on the outskirts of town. I'd heard rumors about the place, but I didn't believe in ghost stories. Money was money and a fare was a fare. I accepted the ride and headed towards the address. As I approached the mansion, my stomach sank for some reason. The house was bathed in moonlight. Its broken windows were like eyes watching me. The malnourished garden and the creaking gate didn't help. I pulled up to the front and waited. After a few moments, the passenger emerged from the mansion. He was tall and had a heavy-set build, with the brim of his hat covering his face. He wore an old-fashioned suit, the kind you see in black and white photos. He got into the back seat without a word, and I felt the temperature in the car drop. "Where to?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Downtown," he replied, in a voice that was barely more than a whisper. With his response, my stomach sank again. As we drove, I couldn't shake the feeling of being stared at. I glanced at the rearview mirror and saw him staring straight ahead, his eyes never meeting mine. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the hum of the engine and the occasional rustle of his clothing. We passed through the city, the streets empty. The usual sounds of nightlife were absent, replaced by a natural stillness. I tried to make small talk, but he never responded. Eventually, I gave up and focused on the road, counting down the minutes until the ride was over. When we reached the destination, I pulled over and turned to tell him the fare, but he was gone. The back seat was empty, and the door had never opened. My heart raced as I looked around, but there was no trace of him. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. Shaken, I drove home and tried to forget about the encounter. But that night, as I checked my trip history, there was no record of the ride. No pickup, no drop-off, nothing. It was as if the entire trip had never happened. The next day, I mentioned the incident to a friend who lived in the area. His face was a complete shock, saying, "You picked up someone from that mansion? It's been abandoned for decades. They say it's haunted by the ghost of a man who disappeared there 100 years ago." I laughed it off, but deep down, I knew the truth. That night, I'd given a ride to a passenger who had long since left this world. And every time I drove past that mansion, I could feel his eyes on me, waiting for another chance to take the last ride.